Hey beauty babes, welcome to my channel. I'm Maria, aka Agape Love Girl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Well, today's video is all about the CoverGirl TruBlend Matte Made foundation. I'm looking down at the package so I can remember the name. I, as many other influencers you have probably seen, received a giant package with literally all the shades that CoverGirl recently launched of this foundation. So I figured I'd throw my review in there. I will just say right off the bat, this is more of a first impressions review. I have worn this foundation. Today will be the third time I've worn this foundation. I do have a lot of thoughts. I do have some notes here. I'm going to try to keep myself on track and keep it organized. I'll have timestamps in the description box. And even though I have a lot to say, I still want to consider this a first impressions review because I haven't, used this long term to say, oh, this is a review. My thoughts have kind of fluctuated and changed since just the 3 times I've used it. So I feel like I have, like I said, a lot of opinions. Now I will have 2 demos to show you, as well as I plan to do some check-ins later tonight and let you guys know the update about how this wore, so you can see for yourself. I have some close-ups of my face and all that stuff. I've got a lot to share. I hope you'll find it informative and helpful even for a first impressions review. But this is probably going to be a long video. I'm just going to say right away, I'm not even going to try to pretend like I'm keeping this quick. It'll probably be a long video, but I hope you guys find it helpful. Again, check the description box for timestamps. Alright, first off, right off the bat, I do want to say thank you so much to CoverGirl for sending this package. It was a huge, generous, very generous package. At the same time, I felt slightly overwhelmed by it because literally I got all 40 shades and I'm just thinking, what am I going to do with all these? I don't need all these. I know that they probably sent all of them out so there could be people doing swatches of all the shades and let you guys know what the shade range is, because from what I've seen, a lot of people have been saying you're not going to find all 40 shades in the store. So a lot of people are saying there's only like 10 or so shades in their store. So this kind of gives you an idea of the different shade range. You could look it up online, see swatches and things like that, and maybe order online. I know there's already a lot of people who have put up reviews and put up swatch photos and swatch videos and all that amazing stuff. So I'm not going to do that. I just think that would be a little bit wasteful on my end. If I go and pump and use all of them just to be able to show you guys the shade range, it would be so wasteful. So what I'm going to do is actually be gifting a lot of these. So that means I won't be swatching them here. So if you're looking for swatches of all of them, you won't find that here. I do apologize. I just definitely don't want to be wasteful of the products they sent. But I am grateful for it because I definitely, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, had a little bit trouble finding my shades. It was nice to have such a variety of shades to look at and try for me to figure out what was my best shade. So thank you so much to CoverGirl. I just want to get out of the way. I am very thankful, but I do have some critical things to say in addition to the positives. So yeah. Alright, now right off the bat, I'm going to be somewhat critical. Just bear with me. I just have some thoughts. So we got this like booklet and it's like super dramatic, like because we listen ... CoverGirl set out to create the foundation that works for all skin types. So we listen to you and we're inspired to create TruBlend Matte Made. And while I'm not going to shade them whatsoever for coming out with 40 shades of foundation, I think yay, bravo, finally, that's a really good thing. I think we all know that like once Fenty Beauty came out with all these shades and being super exclusive, like a lot of other brands realized like, okay, we need to meet that mark. We need to be a little bit more inclusive, or a lot more inclusive. And I think that's cool that they're doing that. So I'm not shading that part. But one thing that like I thought instantly when I saw this was like, because we listened, I instantly, my mind went to the CoverGirl, same brand, Vitalist Healthy Elixir Foundation. And I would have thought that like, instead of coming out with a brand new foundation, why not expand a line that you know people already love? Like, this is such a limiting, and I talked about this already in my top 5 favorite foundations. This wasn't in the top 5, but I do mention this in that video. If you haven't watched it, I will link it. Please check it out. This is a foundation I do really like though, just so you know. But the shade range is so limiting, and I've heard so many people, countless people, talking about how limited it is and how they wish they would expand it because it's a good foundation, but there's just not a color that matches them, especially for deep-skinned beauties. And so I think that's really unfortunate. I have a couple of friends with darker skin, a pretty deep skin, and they're like, this foundation would be amazing, I would love to try it, but they don't have it in my shade range. And I just feel like, because we listen, like if you were listening, for a long time now people have been asking for an expansion of that shade range. So I do hope that they keep listening and do expand other lines of their foundation they know people already love, that's already loved, but you need more shades in those foundation. So part of me was kind of like throwing side eye at that, like, because we listened thing. I know that's dramatic, but I just feel like, why come out and put so much effort into a brand new foundation when you have a great one already that just needs more shade? So I'm gonna try to end my rant on that there, because I do have some positive things to say, but I just want to get that out of the way. Alright, moving on to the topic of the shade range. As I already mentioned, there are 40 shades, which is pretty incredible. So L for light, M for medium, T for tan, and D for deep. And then within those shade ranges, they have included warm, cool, and neutral undertones. So there's the whole kind of, almost the whole spectrum of shades within the shades, if that makes sense. So I do think that is really cool. The only thing that I find that I just wish they would have also included, because I feel like it was really cool that they did the M70, like they have the numbers and all that stuff so you can kind of easily find your shade. But at the same time, as I mentioned in the beginning, had a hard time finding my shade because they don't really make it clear what the undertones are. So while it says they have, warm, cool, neutral undertones, they don't say, and they are a little bit hard to tell just judging by the bottle shade what the undertone is. And I'm pretty good at finding my undertone, but some of these were just, it was hard to tell by looking at the bottle. So I do wish that they would have put, what the undertone is, if not on the bottle, like at least on the website. And I did go look at the website just to see if it maybe would say the description of the shade, what the undertone was, in addition to what range it was in, but it doesn't say it on the website either. So it's a little bit of a disappointment. It's a little bit of a mystery there. You kind of really have to decipher what shade you're gonna be, and you might get it wrong, because I did a couple times. All right, and I still don't feel like I fully have a perfect match for me. I still have a couple other ones that I could try, but I really don't think they're gonna work for me. So initially I matched myself to M10, and this is the shade Golden Natural, and this is one I do have a demo for because I used it the other day and I decided to film myself so you guys can see. This one is a decent match for me. It's probably the one that's, I would say, works probably the best for me, but it is a bit too light for me. Then I did try a darker shade. I didn't actually put this one on. I started to, but I quickly realized that it was not going to be my shade, and that was M20, and this is the shade Warm Beige. So I thought, like, warm beige, it might have warmer undertones. So to me, I feel like the names don't really match up with the undertones, so that doesn't help, because while I thought it looked a little bit neutral or cool toned in the bottle, I thought, well, warm beige, it's probably a warm undertone, it just looks different in the bottle. But no, this is a very, very cool toned color that just really doesn't match. Or maybe it's neutral, but it looks very cool against my more warm tone or olive tone skin. So that didn't work for me. So then I tried today, in today's demo, the shade M70, which if you look at me right now, I feel like it's a good match. I don't feel like it's too dark for me at all, but when I'm putting it on in the demo, you can definitely see that it's quite a bit darker than me, and you probably notice more in the demo, like around my neck, because I bring it down my neck, but I feel like I was noticing like from right here where I brought it down to right here, it's definitely, there's definitely a difference. I did lighten it up a little bit with concealer, and I feel like that kind of balanced it out. So I think this one could work for me too as I get a little bit darker, but this one, I mean, it's pretty far over in the shade range for the medium. But this one, the reason why I chose to use this one is because it was the closest one to my match for the Healthy Vitalist, which I have something to say about in a minute, but those look pretty close. The Vitalist is a little bit lighter, so I figured this one would be a little bit dark for me. So I think that if I mix these two together, that might be a perfect match for me currently. And you might be wondering, like, well, there's, you know, that's M10 and M70, that's a huge gap, but if you like look, like, in, you know, 20, that was like a neutral or a cooler tone shade, and then here's the other ones, you know, somewhat in between. Here's M30, which actually, now that I'm looking at it, I don't know, maybe that one might work for me. See, I just still have to try, but I feel like when I was looking at them, you know, not beside my face, this one looks like it'd be a little bit too cool tone for me. Oh, this one's interesting. This one I thought might be actually a match for me. This is M50. This is one I almost got in, almost used today instead of M70. This was super, super dark, and this is actually way darker than the M70. I don't know if you could tell that in the bottle. They almost look the same, but swatched. This one is way, way darker. It's like way more tan, so I was like, M50 is not going to work for me. So M70 was actually lighter than M50. But that shows you my like slight difficulty in finding a good match for me. While there is a nice vast shade range, it's just it's kind of tough to figure out your perfect match. So I don't know. The thing I wanted to go back to about the CoverGirl Vitalist foundation, which I really like, I thought, okay, you know what, I'm gonna, like I said, I matched those ones up to what would be closest to this one, and none of them are really super close to this one. But I thought, okay, well, I'm just gonna look at the name because they have the numbers, but then they also have the name on the back. So this is Buff Beige. So let me just show you something real quick. So then I went to look and find Buff Beige in the numbers for the new foundation, and this is Buff Beige in this matte foundation. This is M15, but if you look at them, they are so different. Whereas this is more of a warm tone foundation, this is definitely a cool tone foundation, and when swatched side by side, this was just so fair and so cool toned. I was like, how, like, why are you doing that? Like, it doesn't make sense. Why is this Buff Beige, and what makes this Buff Beige and this Buff Beige? Like, they're not the same. I know it's a different foundation totally, but you would think the names would somewhat sync up. I mean, it's the same brand too, so I mean, to me, that doesn't make sense to me. So I know that's a lot of, I feel like, maybe negativity, but I'm just throwing at you. I'm just letting you know my like struggle with it, and letting you guys know that it might be a little bit tough to find your shade range. So while it is great they have all these shades, it doesn't make it easy to find your shade, just so you know. So there is that. Let's move on. All right, now let's bring this to a positive note. Let's talk about the things I do like about this foundation. Now, I really like the packaging. I think they did a really great job. I do like that they made it really clear with the letters on here, the M and then the number. I think that's really great. I love that it has a pump, and not only does it have a pump, but it has a locking system. So basically, if you turn it this way, it locks in place. You cannot push down on this. So if the lid accidentally comes out, if you have this in your purse, you're traveling or anything like that, there's no way like your foundation's gonna come out. So you actually have to twist it and then it'll pump. And I just think that is so smart. I love that. I love that the cap clicks on really well, because sometimes there's foundations with caps and they kind of like go on, but they don't really click in, so it's like the cap falls off super easy. So not only does this have a lock, but it's got a really good snapping cap. I like that. All right, and I know that was just like one simple thing, but I think that's really great. Packaging can make a difference, and not just cutesy packaging, but functional packaging. I like that. I will have more positive things to say later on in my review, but I also want to kind of move on, because they also, in addition to sending the foundations, they also came out with 4 new primers. I'm actually going to be demoing two on my face today, one on one side and one on the other, just for the sake of trying them. Normally I don't get super excited about foundations or primers, so I don't imagine I'll have a ton to say in my review aspect or thoughts of them, but I just wanted to be sure to include them in this video, let you guys know a little bit more about them. So I'm going to go ahead and insert some footage of the primers up close, tell you a little bit more about them. So up first we got the Skin Smoothing Primer, which is said to visibly smooth skin for the perfect canvas. And then we have the Pore Minimizing Primer. This has a little bit of a lavender tint, and it's supposed to visibly reduce and blur pores while mattifying the skin. Then there is the Illuminating Primer, and these include pearl pigments that illuminate and hydrate to enhance skin's radiance. And lastly, we have the Color Neutralizing Primer, which has a little bit of a green tint, which most of us know helps to neutralize redness. So that's what this does. It's supposed to help neutralize redness and help correct uneven skin tone. Now you're going to see later in the demo that I chose to use the Illuminating Primer because I like the idea of more luminosity or more luminous skin. I also chose to use the Neutralizing one because I do tend to have some redness in my skin and stuff like that, so I just wanted to give those a go. But I didn't use any of these primers for my first demo. Like I said, I have two demos for you. I'm going to go into one demo first. This is using the shade M10, and tell you a little bit about that experience, and then we will go into my next demo and I'll tell you a little bit more about the claims of this foundation, and then we'll go into kind of like my first impressions, and we'll move on from there. Now, as I mentioned, I have used this foundation 3 times. The very first time I used it, I didn't film. I used it the very first day I got the package. I used it with a brush, and I thought the application was just okay. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't like my favorite. I've said this before, but I've been kind of lazy to be using a sponge. I'm just too lazy to use a sponge, so that's why I decided to just grab a brush and put it on really quick. And I was just like, no, I think I'd rather prefer this foundation with a sponge. So that's what you're seeing in this demo. In this demo that you're seeing, I'm using, like I said, the shade M10. I also primed my face with the Touch in Sol No Problem Primer. The very first day I wore it, I didn't have any primer on at all. Now, what I noticed with this first demo I'm sharing with you, and actually the very first time I tried this foundation, and I thought it was kind of weird, after application, like there is, and I'll have some up close shots to show you, but there are kind of these white pigment spots with the foundation. I thought at first that maybe it was the brush doing that. I didn't know what it was. I'm not sure. Then I did it with a sponge, and I was still having that issue. I thought it was super weird. I didn't know if maybe the, pigment just wasn't fully blended. Maybe it was just that shade, but I ended up happening just a little bit today as well, so I don't think it's just that shade. I really don't know what's up with that. It's not a huge problem because once the foundation dried down, I could easily like swipe those little white spots away, but I just thought it was weird. So I don't know if that's just a normality with this foundation, if that's something that you will experience too, but that is something I experienced and I thought I would just mention to you. Also, I will say that initially with my first 2 experiences trying this foundation, I really wasn't like a big fan of it, which is a really big contrast. I know usually it's like hard to tell like if you like a foundation when you're trying it for the first time, but usually I know, like when I mentioned this in my other video, my foundation video, that when I first tried the Covergirl Vitalist Healthy Elixir foundation, like instantly I knew I loved it. Instantly I thought it was good. I just knew it was a good foundation, and that it would be one that I really liked. However, the first 2 times I tried this foundation, I was just kind of like not impressed. It wasn't that there was anything bad about it necessarily, but it just felt like there wasn't anything like stand out about it either. It was just like okay. It wasn't anything that was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And I do feel like it wore really well. And I don't know, I just felt like the first 2 times I wore it, for the coverage, I just felt like it felt too heavy on my skin. And that could have just been the different ways I personally prefer to apply my makeup. I do a lot of powder, I use setting spray twice, I do a lot of things that kind of can make my makeup feel heavy, but that's why I typically like a very lightweight foundation because of these other steps that I do. So I like to keep it as lightweight as possible, and for me it just felt like in my normal routine it felt very heavy on my skin. I wouldn't say it's like, oh my gosh, so heavy and cakey on my skin, but heavier than what I'm used to, and even heavier than the, you know, Vitalist Elixir foundation, which it actually has more and better coverage than this, but felt more lightweight. So I just found that strange, and so in comparing those two, I was just like, there's no way. Like, I don't think I like this foundation. I don't think it's that great. I definitely think the Healthy Elixir is a better foundation, and going back to what I said in the beginning, I wish they would have just expanded that range. So those were my initial thoughts upon my first 2 times trying this foundation. I decided to do things a little bit different with my foundation today, and the way I'm going to test it today and film and do my check-ins and things like that. And already I can tell you that I do feel a little bit differently about the foundation than I did the first time. And this is why I feel like it's pretty important to do more than just a first impression, even though a lot of times when I come on video and share a first impression review with you, it's not like an initial first impression. It's not my first time trying it. I feel like I you know, can try it a few times and come on camera and give you a first impression review, and some of you might consider that more of a real review, but I still consider it a first impression because it's still new to me. I can't say like I've reviewed this for a length of time, but it's not like an instant, you know, first impressions review. So it's not a true first impressions review, but it's also not a true real review, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't do that, because my first impressions of it were just like, it's not that great. It's not a bad foundation, but it's really nothing special to me. So anyways, I'm glad I waited. I did things a little bit differently today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I did and how I applied and why into this next demo that I'm going to share with you as well. Then I'm going to go ahead and go into the claims of this foundation, and then share my kind of secondary first impressions of how I'm feeling about it today. Alright, so I want to try out 2 of the CoverGirl new primers. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and use the color neutralizing one, which has a little bit of a green tint in it, which is good for neutralizing redness and things like that. And then I'm also going to try the illuminating one. So I'm going to be using the neutralizer on my right side, which would be your guys' left, and then the illuminating on my left side. And the reason I'm just saying that is it seems like I have a little bit more redness going on my right side, so I don't know, yeah, we'll see how that goes. And that just gives me a way to try two primers at one time. Okay, I'm just going to briefly mention that I don't feel like the primer super did anything noticeable, like super noticeable. I feel like up close I could see a difference, but it wasn't something that I felt like was super obvious that you guys are probably going to notice on, you know, on camera, but we shall see the longevity and how this helps at the end of the night. I did like that it was a really lightweight primer, nothing that felt too heavy, too sticky, too thick, or anything like that. Kind of went on just very smooth and silky, so that was good. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of interject a few of the claims here just so you guys know a little bit more about the foundation. But the claims are for the TruBlend Matte Made Foundation is that it is oil free, so you don't get shiny, living your life. It's transfer resistant, aka won't rub off your favorite white tea. It's pore minimizing for smooth and even selfie ready skin. And it has all day comfort wear, so you can put it on and not worry about your skin feeling cakey or dry. So those are the claims that I read directly from the little booklet that was sent to me, and I will talk a little bit more about those claims and my thoughts more towards the end of the video after this demo, where I share my first impressions. Okay, I'm liking this a lot better today than I have the past couple of times I've tried it. Today it does feel a lot more lightweight. It looks a lot more lightweight and natural. I'm liking it definitely a lot better today, so. This is it on its own. Now I'm going to go ahead and light it up with concealer. I'm not going to show you the full application of the concealer. I just want to show you where I'm putting it so you know where the application was. And this has been the concealer I've used the last couple of times I've used it, so that hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the way I've applied it, and I felt like today it was a little bbit harder to blend on top of the foundation. Like, it kind of was just so dry, the foundation, that like the concealer was kind of like sticky, but not sticky. I don't know, no, it wasn't like fully like melding in with the foundation. It just kind of like sitting on top of it. I don't know, and I haven't really had that experience before, so I don't know, it's just, you definitely need to go in with a pretty damp sponge. I did use a mixture of the Juno sponge that I used with the foundation, and then also kind of for a little bit more precision I used my finger bullet sponge, and maybe it's just because that's a dry sponge and this one's a little bit more dry, you don't really feel the dampness, that was why. It doesn't look as blended as it normally would any other way or with other foundations or things like that, so I don't know, that's just something to mention. Now I don't really feel the need for this to be set like super much at all. Like it's, I mean, I could probably get away with not setting it. There's like no stickiness or tackiness to it, but just for the sake of setting it, because I am going to go in with you know, my contour and everything, and I don't want there to be stickiness or patchiness at all, I'm just going to set it really quick, very lightly with a duo fiber brush, and then the Covergirl Vitalist Healthy powder. Alright, so here's what my face is looking like now that I've set it. That definitely helped. It feels really smooth. It doesn't feel, you know, dewy or tacky at all. It didn't really before, but it just feels even more so, I feel like, secure to put other powders on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of my face, and I'll be back on camera to continue on with this video. I also will mention that I'm not going to use a setting spray at all today. Normally I use setting spray at least twice in my makeup application routine, but I'm not going to today, just to really put the wear to the test. Alright, I'm popping back in to show you guys the way this looks after I have put on the rest of my face. I finished up my makeup. I meant to pop in sooner, but I solely spaced it because I'm in the middle of filming several other videos, so I've actually had the foundation already on for about an hour now, maybe a little bit more than an hour. So the time is 2:29 right now, if you can see, almost 2:30. So I've had this on for, I think, since, let me check, my daughter texted me earlier around the time I finished. She texted me at 1:12, so since 1:12 I'm gonna say. So I did have to do a little bit of damage control because I was, and this is so my bad, I shouldn't have done this, but I was trying a new contour product because I was also filming my BoxyCharm video today, and it was not good. And I don't think it was just the foundation, because this is my third time wearing it, and it played well with the other bronzers and contours that I use typically, so I really think it was just the contour palette that I used. So I had to do a little bit of damage control and put a little bit more powder on my face, basically just kind of cleaning up right here and around about right here, because it was looking so patchy. It just was not good. So there is a little bit more powder on my face than I had wanted to, because I really wanted to test this foundation out without putting too much more product on top of it to mattify it or anything like that, like, you know, powders. My typical way I apply makeup is to apply a lot of powder and then do setting spray twice in my routine. A lot of you guys might know that already, but anyways, I wanted to refrain from that. So I'm kind of bummed, but I didn't do a lot of powder, just enough to kind of clean it up so it didn't look so muddy on my face. But I did not spray with setting spray, and I really am itching to like spray my face with setting spray. I feel like it needs it. I feel like it needs a little bit of a quench of something, but I'm not going to. I'm going to refrain because I don't want anything to enhance the longevity of this makeup, as well as like how it feels and transfers. But right now it's feeling really, really good. There's absolutely no transfer, no dewy feeling or anything. I know this says matte, so it shouldn't feel dewy, but the first couple of times I wore it, I felt like there was a little bit of tackiness to it, and I don't know if that was just because of the setting spray or whatever it was, but it definitely feels very matte, very touchable, very wearable, all that stuff. No residue on my fingers and things like that. So that's what it's looking like right now at 2:30, 2:31 now. So I will have some up close footage for you guys that you guys are probably seeing at some point while I'm talking here, just so you guys can get an idea of what it looks like up close now, fairly freshly applied after I've applied other products on top of it. Alright, now that you guys have seen the demo and heard a little bit more about the claims and seen, you know, this in action with concealer and powder and different things like that, I just wanted to come on and share my first impressions, well, technically my second first impressions, but my impressions of it today, because it's definitely different, as I said, than my initial impressions from trying this foundation. Right off the bat, I just want to say that I actually really love the way it looks right now. The way it applied today applied so much more natural and lightweight than it had the first 2 times I tried it. Again, like I said, the second time I tried it, I really did it like with my normal routine, caking on the powder and all that, setting spray, and I feel like that probably was a big part of it. Also, I used the No Pore Film Primer, which I wouldn't say is like a heavy primer, but I don't know if maybe that possibly had something to do with it as well, though I've used it with other primer or other foundations and it doesn't make them feel heavy either, so I don't know. Anyways, that's just something to note. So today I really kept it light. I didn't cake on the powder. I didn't even use setting spray, as I already mentioned. I just really kept it lightweight, and I feel like it looks and feels a lot better today. Now, this doesn't claim to be a full coverage foundation, and it definitely is not a full coverage foundation. As you saw or can see in the close-ups, you can definitely see my blemishes showing through. That is something that I am not bothered by, but if it's something that bothers you and you like your blemishes to be covered up, this won't be the foundation for you, but that truly doesn't bother me, especially with how lightweight this feels, where initially my thoughts were, if it's going to feel heavy and also be so lightweight, like this is definitely a no-go foundation for me. But I do like much better how it feels today and the way I applied. So if I continue using this, I will have to be a lot more careful in the way I apply and in my do it differently than my normal foundation routine would be. So in general, I just think this is kind of a finicky foundation, so it may not be worth the trouble to you, but depending on the results and the finish and how well it lasts and things like that, you just got to gauge what your preference is and what trouble is worth it for you for a foundation, if that makes sense. So that's really kind of my basic overview of my first impressions. So rather than ramble on, I'm just gonna kind of try to quickly go through the claims that I have here that I already mentioned through the demo and tell you what I think about the claims as I've tried it. So the first one is that it's oil free. That is like neither here nor there for me. Some people might be super grateful that a product is oil free. I don't know if it needs to be oil free for me. My skin tone or my skin type is normal, so I don't like products don't get typically don't get super oily or super whatever on me. It's whatever. So that claim is like whatever to me. Transfer resistant, so won't rub off on your favorite white tea. I can say that I can touch my face right now and I have no a residue on my hands, so I do feel fairly confident that it would be transfer resistant on a white tea. I might try to get a napkin later and see if I can do a little test, but at the same time I'm kind of concerned because I do have powder on my face, which that might transfer, so it's hard to really say if this does or doesn't transfer, because it could be the powder. What I probably should do is just do like a patch test on my hand to let that dry down and then touch it, because really it's just the foundation that's transfer proof, not the powder and other products I put on top of it. Thirdly, it's supposed to be pore minimizing. Now I will say that I don't have a super enlarged pores or super noticeable pores. I definitely have pores. I'm not saying I don't have pores or my skin's super smooth, but they're not like super enlarged. I don't ever feel the need to use a pore minimizing primer or anything like that. So I feel like it's hard for me to attest if this is pore minimizing. It's not like I can't see my pores anymore, but I will say one thing that I do kind of gauge this factor on is that I do have some larger pores on the side of my nose. They're kind of so large that it almost looks like I've had a nose piercing, which I haven't, but we could pretend that I have, but that's how big they are. And sometimes there are foundations that basically just like lay over top of it in a way to where it doesn't like fill in, and it just like how do I explain it? Like it kind of skips over that hole, that big pore, and you see foundation coverage over everything except for that pore, and it makes that hole, that pore, look way noticeable, and I'm not getting that with this foundation. Like it filled it in It went into my pore, and it kind of, I wouldn't say it made my pore go away, but it didn't make it noticeable, which other foundations can definitely make my pores look more noticeable, and I hate that. So this one does a good job. So in terms of pore minimizing, it very well could be pore minimizing to someone who has more noticeable pores on their cheeks or face and things like that. I do feel like my skin looks very smooth, it looks nice, you know? So I'm happy with that. Now the last one is all day comfort wear without feeling cakey or dry, and so that's something I'm gonna do a check-in with you to show you guys. I can attest I wore all day yesterday, and at the end of the day, I don't know how many hours I wore it, but I did wear it all day. I would say maybe 8 hours. It was probably about what I wore it, and at the end of the day my makeup still looked pretty great. And a lot of the times there are foundations that will kind of like crack up in my fine lines, my smile lines here, which is typical. That's like not unnatural for most foundations, but I felt like this one actually looked pretty darn good at the end of the night and didn't crack up in my smile lines as much as some other foundations you know, would. So that is a plus. I do feel like it has really good wear. I believe that it says somewhere more specifically that it's 12-hour wear. Yeah, it says on the bottle 12-hour wear, so that's the all day. It's not 24 hours, it's nothing crazy, but all day wear, which is 12 hours is a normal time frame to say all day, because hardly anyone, at least I certainly do not wear a foundation for that long, so I feel like that's a good claim to say it's all day wear. But I will come back and update you guys with a check-in, let you guys see my face, you know, one more time, so you can see for yourself how all day wear it is. And the second thing on here says without feeling cakey or dry. I will say that yes, today my face definitely feels a lot less cakey than it had previously. Again, that has to do with application. Application matters in this foundation. And then also without feeling dry, which I think is an interesting claim considering this is a matte foundation. And when a lot of people think of matte foundations, typically you think of like dry foundations, you know, and this definitely isn't a matte foundation in the sense that it like super dries you out. So I do appreciate that. I do feel like it is very comfortable. It doesn't feel dry on my skin. I wouldn't say my skin feels hydrated. I definitely feel the desire to want to put setting spray on my face, not because it's like so dry, but just because I'm used to putting setting spray on my face. I'm not used to filling my face with just powders and leaving it at that. But it doesn't feel like uncomfortably dry or anything like that. So there is all that information with the claims. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and leave you for, you know, for you guys it'll be an instant, but I'm gonna be done filming for the day. I did show you guys my phone earlier when I filmed. I've kind of been filming in chunks for this video and filming other videos in between. I think earlier it was like 2:30. Right now it is 3:54, and so almost 4 o'clock. So that's my face now, and I will try to check back in later today and we will wrap up this video. Alright guys, it is 8:43. I'm just gonna go ahead and zoom you guys right in to show you a close-up of how this is looking. Okay, so it's been about 8 hours of wear, so let's just talk about what we are seeing. So I think in general, overall, the foundation wore well. Keep in mind I'm speaking on the foundation alone. We need to ignore the awful patchy contour. So what's impressing me the most right now is that there is no caking or creasing, especially in my smile lines, which usually always happens by the end of the day. Overall, from afar, I think my face looks good. Up close, my main issue is with the patchy contour. And the foundation did seem to fade away a bit, as you can tell. There isn't as much coverage as there was earlier, so my blemishes are a bit more noticeable. At the same time, I do think that the foundation faded pretty gracefully in the sense that there aren't just patches of foundation missing. It all seemed to fade fairly evenly, with the exception of around my nose, which I do tend to touch a lot. I want to just wrap up this video. I know it's already super long. I had a lot of opinions, a lot of thoughts on it. Wanted to give you guys a lot of my full experience from my very first impressions, like initial impressions, to, you know, trying it different ways. And I will say, like, I sat down today to film this video starting off, and I was thinking that I was going to give this a negative review. I literally was thinking this is probably going to be a negative review. But at the end of the day now, I am surprised to say that I actually think I'm impressed. I'm surprisingly impressed.
Hey beauty, so I just want to pop in really quick and say that thinking back as I'm editing this footage, I'm actually not as impressed with this foundation as I felt the day I filmed this. I think I was just so tired this evening and I was just, I don't know, delusional a little bit. But anyways, thinking back, this is supposed to be a 12-hour wear foundation, and if after 8 hours there was so much fading, I just can't say I'm that impressed. What I think I was more impressed with is that it faded, in my opinion, pretty gracefully. But overall, this foundation I find to be so finicky, I can't get myself to like it. I will still say that I don't think it's a bad foundation, but it's just not one I would desire to keep using. So I just wanted to insert a little update there for you guys.
I do think this is a fairly good foundation. I'm not going to call it a favorite because I don't know, there's something about it that I'm just thinking like there's other foundations I just like more. But a lot of the foundations I like are already lightweight but give better coverage than this, and I think that kind of makes them better in my opinion, even though I don't mind if my blemishes show through, but I know a lot of people do. So if you're looking for something that has better coverage, it's still lightweight. There's more out there than just this, but this isn't a bad foundation. I think it wears really well. My biggest thing with it is that, again, the shades, the struggle to find the right shade was a frustration for me, and then two, I feel like it depends on application. You got to really figure out the best way to apply to where it's going to work the best for you. Like I said, I tried this 2 other ways. The way I tried it today has changed my mind about it. I didn't think I was going to like this foundation, but the way I applied it today, doing things very different than I normally do for my normal foundation routine, and I liked it. So that meant cutting out a lot of the powder, which is fine. It didn't need to be set with a lot of powder. I didn't use setting spray, but I'll probably still use setting spray in the future. But also applying it, I did apply it with a sponge, but it's the Juno sponge, which is the microfiber sponge. So it's kind of like a mix of the brush and the sponge in one, which is what I think gave it such good application today. So I think you just have to play around with application, do what, figure out how it's going to apply best for you, and you might just love it. So basically, with everything that I shared, if you still think this sounds like a good foundation, something that you would be interested in, things and qualities about a foundation that you like, then this could be a foundation for you. If there's anything about it that I mentioned that, are things you don't like in a foundation, this is probably not for you. But overall, I do think it's a good foundation. I think it's a recommend. I'll give it a thumbs up, and that's it. I'm ready to go take my makeup off and go lay in bed because I'm an old woman. So with all that being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found it helpful and informative. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, much love and hugs to you. Bye, beauty babes.